we're recording.
Okay. Well, mostly I wanted to talk about my childhood and how things looked to me from that viewpoint. And
You grew up in the Depression.
yes, I did, and there weren't a lot of big advantages, and we didn't have a lot of automobiles. And my grandparents bought a 1930 Nash, and that was their transportation. My dad had to drive it all the time because Grandpa Smith wouldn't drive. He and Dad fought over about everything, and so they just finally gave up to the point where he was in charge of the driving and getting where they wanted to go. And my mother and I lived with Grandpa and Grandma Griffin until I was 9 years old. And I had 5 cousins that were within a block of where we lived, and they were always there quite often because Grandpa Griffin had a steady job working for a company named Noggle, was Baker Supply place over on 5th and Washington Street in Kansas City, Missouri.
And wasn't he a chemist for them?
Well, my great-grandfather was there also. That was Mr. His name was Charles Woodward Griffin, and he and his wife lived over on 25th Street in Kansas City, Kansas. This is all written down in some places. And but he worked there, and Grandpa Griffin, Art Griffin, he worked over there. He was more or less made batches of material for Baker's Supplies and measuring it out, and sort of a chemical deal, maybe blending some things. But we lived there with them, and they gave us a place to sleep and food to eat. Get along pretty good. My cousins, of course, being that close by, we'd get into squabbles about various things. Grandpa had decided to enlarge the basement, which was under this little house, and started carrying all the dirt out, and we had what we called a dirt pile out in the back, and we'd go out and dig and make tunnels and stuff in it. We had a lot of fun that way. And when I got to Chelsea grade school, I was there for about 3 years, and Mother got married when I was 9, and she married to Jack Reeves, or Oliver Wendell Reeves was his full name. And we moved into a little house over on 13th Street in Kansas City, Kansas. We always had to be close to where he could walk to Bethany Hospital where he worked. He was pretty much a handyman. He could build almost anything with his hands, or as far as woodwork and things of that kind, of painting, maintenance of the hospital. But we moved often. Rents were like $15 a month for a little unfurnished house, and we didn't have a lot of furniture.
And he probably wasn't making much more than that.
Well, he was. He was making maybe $30–40 a month in some cases. You had to buy coal back in those days to haul the coal in. They bring it up close to the house, and they showed in a little window that went down into the basement of the house that you were living in. They had these old hot air furnaces, no forced air stuff. It was just the heat would come up through the house. And we got along pretty good. Like I've told you before, Jack probably was disappointed that I didn't respond to him. He was more interested in sports than I ever was. He'd like to have played baseball, or had me play catch with him, things of that kind, but it just wasn't within me to feel comfortable with it. I didn't ever treat him mean. He never treated me mean. And we moved on. I think a total of 5 times from the time I was 9 until I was probably somewhere around 15. And then we moved into a house on Split Log, and Grandpa and Grandma Griffin had decided they would sell their house, which we lived in on 27th Street over there. And Grandpa bought a little 80 acres down in Arkansas. And we went down there for a 2-week vacation deal, and he and Jack added a room to this little shack that was on the house, on the land. And we lived in a tent. We all slept on army cots, and the lizards would get up on that tent and run around and sound like it was raining. It entirely different, you know, but my cousin Bob, he was along with us. He was 2 years older than I was. And we just lived down there. Ticks were thick and the heat was awful.
And that was his retirement dream,
That
I
was
guess.
his dream of retirement, but that didn't materialize. He decided that he couldn't go clear down there to Arkansas, so they bought a place at Buffalo, Missouri that had 2 concrete block houses on the property. It was about 5 miles south of Buffalo, Missouri. And they were the coldest thing in the wintertime,
Yes.
the hottest thing in the summertime. But that's where they ended up for a little while. And then, for some reason or other, they decided they'd buy that place down at South Greenfield, Missouri, a log house.
I remember going to that.
Remember that vaguely. They had to have a well drilled. They didn't have running water or anything, so they had this well drilled and had this kind of a tubular pump thing that would drop down in there and it'd fill up, and then the valve would close on the bottom of it, and then they'd draw the water up for use in the house, bathing and drinking and whatever. And that went on for a while. But
How old was he by then?
How old was he? He was probably about 69, 70 years old.
That's a hard living then.
Yeah, it was. And then about that time, you came along, and Grandma Griffin came up and stayed with us for a while you were there. But then she came up another time after Brian was born. And
I remember that.
Yeah. When we lived in the house on 80th Terrace.
Yeah.
I think it gave your mother a little freedom. She could get out, and I think she had a job at Wolferman's down on Main, Maine, and she worked there sometimes for a while. But then things went along pretty good when I got home from the Navy. That's where we just went on to that. When Navy time was, I went to basic training out in San Diego. And after that, I came home on boot leave, and then I went back out to that area.
And you'd been out to California before. You told me about a trip you took out there when you were young.
Yeah, when I was 15, they bought a 1941 DeSoto 4-door. And we went to California to visit my Aunt Ada. That was Grandma Smith's older sister. And she and her husband, Elmer, had an almond grove, I guess you'd call it. And they grew almonds and sold those. And it was located up north of Sacramento.
Had they gone out there during the Depression or before?
Well, yeah, they went out there. A lot of people, some of our cousins from the Griffin's family, they went out there right during the Depression. Many people did, because there were just not any jobs. Part of them had lived, the ones that went to California from Grandma Griffin's family had lived down in Armourdale area and just had worked at just whatever they could do to make a living.
And it was the Griffin side that was the Wichita farm.
Well, yeah, the Wichita, not the Wichita, but the Furley farm.
Furley.
That's where Grandpa Griffin, that's Charles Woodward Griffin. He was a school teacher out there. We've got pictures of that in that book in there. And they were born in that area. Then we had some relatives down near Rose Hill, Kansas, and they were they were cousins to the Griffins. Their name was, I can't think of it now, but we did visit them very often. man was he made harness for horses, and he was a shoemaker, cobbler they called him.
I have vague memories of you taking me to Farley and the little
Down
area.
Furley, yeah.
Furley.
Yeah. Well, you and Brian went down there with us one time after you were born, and I got a picture of you and Brian. Brian had his little boots on and walked out to the barn.
Yeah.
Be careful where you're walking.
Mm-hmm.
But Fred and Stella took good care of us. When I was growing up, that's before the war, I went out there 4 consecutive summers and worked on the farm some, driving the tractor,
Yeah.
whatever handiwork I was capable of doing.
That was one of the things that shaped who you are, I think, working on the farm.
I think so. It gave me an appreciation of hard work, or whatever you want to call it, and not just having somebody go out and bring money. You had to really go out there and provide for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And Fred and Stella were very good Christian people, and they were, of course, third cousins to us, and we enjoyed being there.
Yeah.
And that farm now has gone to some other people that they were kind of related, sure, to Stella. It's a long story too.
Yeah. But I thought before you got into the service years, that'd be interesting, because you've got a lot of fond memories of those years going and working on the farm.
Yeah. I had one girlfriend that she was writing letters to me, and Fred said, "You get Chuck's Daily today?" Mail from her. But then, about probably when I was 17, I met your mother, and we went together some, and when I came back on boot leave, we kind of decided we'd get married, but we didn't do it then. We had to wait until she was 18, I think it was. And I flew back from Adak.
That's where you were stationed in the Navy.
Yes, Adak, Alaska. I was an aviation storekeeper. We had supplies for keeping the airplanes up. But these were basically all leftovers from World War II. And a lot of the surplus stuff, it was declared surplus, and we had it stored in airplane hangars, and some of those airplane hangars just jammed to the doors with military goods that they didn't want to bring back to the States.
This was like 47, 48?
46, 47. I was discharged December 1947.
So right after World War II ended, and you've told some stories what it was like being stationed up there.
Well, it was different, of course, and there were no girlfriends and no trees, and just a lot of muck and snow and ice and wind and everything like that.
How many were up there on your base?
Well, I would probably think that the Navy had probably a couple of thousand guys up there at that point. They had a beer hall, and we'd always go over, could drink all the beer, we could drink in 30 minutes. And some of them got a little bit anxious. Well, they would get more than they could handle. 2 of them stole a truck from the motor pool and ran into the end of a guardrail. The guardrail came up alongside the block in the truck and cut the guy's leg off.
Mm.
His buddy ran off.
Yeah.
And there'd be fights. 2 of them decided they would see who could draw faster one time, and one got winged with a bullet. Things like that gets you in trouble too.
And it was pretty cold up there.
Well, it get cold. Summertimes it wouldn't ever get real hot. I've forgotten exactly what parallel navigation-wise it was on. You'd have to look that up. But it was...
Out on a big rock, though.
Yeah, I've got pictures of the whole island in there. It was interesting flying back out of there the few times that I did. You could look right down into volcanic cones where those islands were originated from.
Mhm.
And of course, to fly back into Anchorage and they'd be able to see Mount McKinley. It's Denali now,
Yeah.
and that's where Luke wanted to go.
Mhm.
He kept thinking he was gonna go up there and get into the deal where they were fishing for crab and some of the things in the dangerous stuff. And he got up there and people pretty much discouraged him with that thing.
Yeah. But that led to some of your fascination with Alaska and that
Yeah.
area.
No, it looked like a great thing, you know, make big money and all that and excitement, but to go out in that kind of weather,
Yeah.
when we would get what they call the willow wall, which is the hard winds that come up through there, and it just blow you sideways.
Wind and cold, it doesn't sound very inviting.
Right. We had Jeeps that guys had cobbled up doors to close up the sidings. They had tin roofs that some of them had put on.
Trying to stay warm.
Well, just down the wind when you're driving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you came back to the States and married Martha
Yeah.
in 47, 46?
1947. Spring of 47, well, it was right her birthday, May 13th of 47. And we lived, like I said, when I got out of the service, we went to that apartment over there on the Quality Hill.
That's what
I
it's
guess
called, yeah, the Quality Hill
Quality
area.
Hill Motel or old apartment building. Terrible neighborhood.
It was pretty run down back in
Yeah.
that time period.
I could catch a streetcar and go down to Swift when I was working there. Had to do that.
Tell us a little bit about your experience with the flood. And
Well, in 1951, I was still in the Naval Reserve, and it came in on July the 13th, 1951. Swift, that it was a Friday. On Thursday night, the manhole covers were popping off the sewers down there. They just pop, pop, pop. And then that Friday morning, I left home at 54 South Bethany and walked down to 10th Street at the top of this viaduct that went over the railroad tracks, and I could look down and see the water coming down Kansas Avenue. And there was a filling station down there that had a light on it, and pretty soon the water had gotten to the point where the light went out. I just said, well, I wasn't going to go to work that day. But it was quite an experience. And being in the Navy, they called for people to come over and watch and see that people didn't get down into the flooded area and steal whatever they could get or whatever.
to guard against looting. And
Right. I was up on 31st and Summit, looking down at that part, and most of that area now has been cleaned out, and they've got various other things. Railroad yards were down there.
railroad and the stockyards were down there.
Well, the stockyards are on over in another area. And peculiar thing was that when I was called to go over to that, I met my dad halfway across the inner city viaduct. Excuse me. He was coming home. He lived over on Hassel Street in Kansas City, Kansas. His car, he had pulled it up on a kind of a bank fill over there as far as he could, and still the water got into about a third of the back end of the car, and he couldn't get it out of there for about a month or so almost, because they had to let everything get drained out.
And that was quite a little walk.
Yeah, he had to walk clear across that way. It's the only connection between the two, between Kansas City, Kansas and Kansas City, Missouri.
That's a couple miles just to the bridge.
Yeah, I suppose so. I don't know exactly route that he went. And that was quite an experience. And you look down into the water and muddy stuff. There were some cattle were still trying to get around. There were pigs that had drowned, and is all that area that's under the intercity viaduct. Never would see anything like that again. I had some pictures of it. It might be interesting to people eventually.
And what you had to do to salvage documents was interesting.
Well, then, of course, I was in the sales, inside sales at that point, and we had to take what documents we had. Mostly it was copies of invoices and things like that. This company had rented a garage, indoor garage over in Kansas City, Missouri. I think it was a Century Garage or something like that. It was on 10th and Walnut, I suppose it was. And we take the documents out and then try to level them out, and we'd hang them on clotheslines with clothespins, lines strung around, and then they had these dryers like the commercial laundries that run things through, and we'd run them through those and try to dry them out that way. I don't know how they ever got it accumulated and taken care of.
Well, you mentioned your father and then your mom. What were your relationship like with your parents growing up?
Well, basically I was with with my mother and grandparent Griffin. And
she was a single parent during the Depression. What was that like?
Yeah, she was. She worked a lot of times in the dime stores over in Kansas City, Kansas, Woolworths, Kresge's. She and Grandma did laundry. Grandma had 2 washing machines down in this basement there on 27th Street. And they had an ironer, one of those commercial things, and they were doing laundry for a lot of different people. Ed Asner's family, for one, and they had a junkyard down there where the old armor packing plant used to be.
Yeah.
And they lived in the upper part of that. They probably got flooded out quite a bit in '51 too. But they had neighbors that they had doctors, a couple people.
But you said your family had it better than a lot through the Depression.
Well, because Grandpa was working, he had a steady job, and we didn't have refrigeration. You had to go get ice, and sometimes the kids, my cousins and I would be in the car, and we'd go down on 18th and State Avenue. There was an ice plant down there, and he'd buy a 50-pound chunk of ice, and we'd carry it back to the house and put it in a little ice box.
Yeah.
And sometimes he could put it on the back bumper. Grandpa was always trading cars. He had an Erskine and I don't know, different kinds of old cars. And sometimes he could put on the bumper back there, and other times he put it on the floor in the back seat. But that was an experience too.
Yeah.
You don't think about, you know. But when Griffins decided that they were going to eventually move out to someplace else, they had a place down in Buffalo, Missouri with the 2 little houses on it. But prior to that, they and Jack and my mother went together and rented the house over at 645 Splitlog in Kansas City, Kansas. It's kind of disjointed, but as it comes along. And we lived there for a while. Bob was with us, and I got really sick there at one point. I guess I had the flu really bad or close to it, pneumonia or something. And I can remember anytime I get a high fever now, I feel like I'm just suffocating. I just want to get away from it. That was about the most sickness I've ever had. But we lived there for probably 2-3 years. I went to a little Bancroft school. And then they decided that they would go together, and Jack and my mother would buy this house on 54 South Bethany. And the Griffins, I guess, they were kind of sharing the expense or something for a while. So we all lived there.
And you ended up with that house when I was a teenager.
Well, the thing that happened there, when Jack passed away, his brothers. He had brother and some nephews, and they inherited the house. And they decided that they needed to sell it because they didn't have any, they didn't ever did have any really good income. So I bought the house from the estate, and Brian and I lived there for a while. He went to Prescott over there.
I remember you had the upstairs apartment.
Yeah, well, Jack had added to that house from the time that after I moved out of there, and he was renting the lower part, and then they added the kind of a wing across the back up there, and it was done pretty well.
Yeah.
But Helen and I we were going together, and we were out at Chuck Edwards' house. He and Esther lived on Summit out south Kansas City, about 80th and somewhere.
Not far from where I live now.
No, on Summit. No, this would be over
Yeah.
west of you there. But the phone rang, and Chuck answered the phone. He said, "Your house is on fire." He said, "What are you talking about? It's on fire." "Yeah, the fireman, the guy that's you rent from, that rents from you, said the police are over there and the fire department's over there." He and I drove over there, and he laughed at this guy downstairs. "Oh, my stuff, I can't hold it, I'm losing everything."
Mhm.
And he's like, Chuck Edwards said, all he had was a bunch of junk. And anyway, we had to settle with the insurance company on that, and they sent a man out with a one-armed carpenter.
Hmm.
And you can imagine
Yeah.
this guy. He could get around and do this stuff up there. He tore out all the stuff that was ruined up above, and got her replaced. And we stayed there until Helen and I got ready to get married. We never did know for sure what happened. They thought that possibly a bird had carried a cigarette butt up there or something. But,
Up in the attic space.
Well, and then it was suspected that Brian might have done something, but we never did.
Never did figure it out.
out.
But Brian was with you, so he couldn't have been there by himself.
No, Brian was not there with us at that dinner.
He might have been over at Mom's or something.
Yeah, he was either there or over at my mother's house. I'm not certain.
So it's hard to put a cause on that. I remember stuff smelled smoky for a long time.
Oh, yes. Well, we ran all kinds of deodorant type of stuff up there trying to get rid of that smell. And the city finally told us that they had to build that outside stairway.
Yeah.
And that was quite a project, but
How'd you meet Helen?
well, we had a mutual friend. I had been going with a girl that I went to school with. I met her in the time that I was divorced. She came to work at a meat packing place that was there on Kansas Avenue that catered mostly to the hotel and restaurant business. Her name was Nadine. It had been Nadine, Nadine Cunningham. And I had a few dates with her, but she had some weird boyfriend that, I don't know whether I've told you that story or not, but
No.
a guy that I knew from Hallmark, and I double dated, and he took Wilma Graham, which is still a friend of Helen's, and she's in touch with her.
Yeah.
And Nadine is a widow now, and we've seen her a couple times. But anyway, Nadine knew this Wilma, and Wilma was Helen's roommate, the house on 3710 Gillum. And I don't know, they apparently got to talking about associations or other, and says, "You got to meet this Chuck." And these two women got together. And I don't know where he wasn't interested. She was going to kind of study with a guy that was in the military out at Olathe that, well, finally I got her phone number and they gave it to me and I called her up and we met and had a drink and we went over on Main and there was a place, you know where the Pontiac dealership used to be there? Just about south of that, I think it was. It's kind of a little bar.
Oh, okay. There's a whole strip of bars still along there on Main Street, across from the Christian church.
Yeah, yeah, we went over there and had a drink, we talked a while. So we decided we'd have a few dates and we did. Went together for about close to 2 years or so off and on.
You met her in what year?
That would have been, yeah, it was 1955, I suppose, 56.
I thought it was later than that. I thought it was early 60s.
Well, no, let's see. That was kind of a blank.
Right in there for you, yeah.
Yeah, you went through that too, I'm sure.
Yeah, because I thought you and Mom got divorced in about 59.
No, actually,
58.
it was 56, I think.
I know I was 8 or 9.
Yeah, and then, so we got married in 62.
Yeah, 62.
So it must have been 59 or somewhere in there.
Somewhere in there.
58,
Yeah.
59. Well, I had the 59 Chevy, so it must have been 59 somewhere in there.
Yeah. And you got married in that Christian church right across the street on
Yeah,
Main, so.
Well, no, the Christian church, well, you're thinking of south of where we actually got together.
Oh, okay.
On more like 40th.
You were further north
Yeah,
then when you went out
49th.
on your first date.
Yeah. But we went together and then I had the house over in Kansas City, Kansas, and Helen wouldn't think about moving to Kansas.
She didn't like that house.
Well, not only that, but it just wasn't anything she wanted to live over there in Kansas City, Kansas. She had been working in co-op in North Kansas City. So Frank Fernando, he was a friend of Chuck Edwards and mine. Chuck had gone to Westport High School, and Frank Fernando had gone there too. He was a funny little Italian guy.
And you knew Chuck through the Navy?
No, met him at Hallmark when I worked Hallmark nights.
Back when you were a teenager.
Another thing, you know, I worked at Hallmark while I was going to high school. And when I turned 16, I could work over there nights. And I met a lot of people.
Yeah.
Chuck Edwards and I, and then Miss Frank Fernando. He played French horn in the Starlight Theater Orchestra and several in the Philharmonic too. But he was doing real estate on the side, and he found out about that house out there on Paseo.
Yeah.
And that house had been vacant. I think Helen and I thought it was something like 10 or 12 years, and all that stuff was still in there.
Yeah, it's like they closed it up after the guy died.
Yeah, they did. You know, it was a half 2-gallon jar full of those old Missouri tokens they used for tax. and that double bar, just double spigot bar down there, a roll top desk, 2 china clad cabinets in the attic up there, some old radios, one with a big horn on it, all this stuff. And we didn't want that old stuff.
Yeah.
Probably worth several $1,000 10, 20 years after that.
I remember going through the magazines. That fascinated me, and all the old magazines they'd left behind.
It's just amazing, all that stuff that was in there. Even that car in the basement.
Car in the basement.
Yeah. But I forgot what it didn't pay a lot for that. That's the only house we ever lost money on.
Yeah.
Because the Black Cloud was coming out south there.
Everybody was selling to move.
Paseo was going to be totally black. Do you remember whatever happened, why they tore down Paseo High School?
It just was getting so old, they replaced it with a new school.
I know they rebuilt one. Helen's into water aerobics with a woman that went there about the same time that your mother did.
Yeah. Well, you did a lot of renovation on that house. I remember you jacked up the bathroom floor was sinking.
Yeah, and the front porch, one of the pillars out there was getting kind of rotten. I got up there and termites had gone up through that stone column. And can you turn that off now? Get a drink.
Okay, you're going to tell us about the house on Paseo. I remember some funny stories about that.
We decided we'd move in there. We borrowed Helen's father's little Ford pickup truck, and we carried some of her stuff from the house there on Gillum out there, and we gave some of the stuff to different friends, an old desk, a nice walnut desk, and then that roll-top desk, I took the top off of that and made a workbench off of it. And it had steam heat, and I had to figure out how to operate that thing. It's never been used for a long time, but we got that to going.
That old refrigerator was one of the things that about killed you.
Yeah, it had a little, what they call a butler's pantry between the kitchen and the dining room. It's just an alcove there, and they had this huge commercial refrigerator. It had 4 doors on it. It was about 6 feet wide, something like that. Well, it was used ammonia for refrigerant, which a lot of commercial stuff still do today. We met a guy not long ago that does ammonia refrigeration for these various ice cream stores around Proms. Anyway, I decided couldn't keep that refrigerator. We wanted a nice new one in there. So I started disconnecting it down the basement, and that ammonia gas started coming out of that silly thing. And I couldn't get out of there quick enough, but I did. It didn't overcome it, but getting that smell out of the house took a while, you know.
That was scary, though.
Yeah, it was. That compressor, I tried to make a compressor to run a spray gun with
I remember that.
But that didn't work out too good.
Had it on a little cart.
Yeah, I had a little cart, and I used it to run that spray gun. It took something like 25 gallons of paint to paint that old stuccoed house.
It hadn't been painted for so long, it just soaked it up like a sponge.
Well, the vines had covered up a lot of it there on the north side. They had to peel that all off, and it left all those little suction cups of that vine. And they, of course, would absorb the moisture. And then that column out in front being riddled with those termites, I knew a person that had a commercial insecticide place down by Armour's there in Kansas City, Kansas, by Armour Plant. Industrial fumigates, I think it was. So I talked them into selling me a gallon of this stuff, and it was tremendous stuff. It knocked almost anything over people too.
Probably we don't know how to use it.
Well, and then you had to have a commercial pump up sprayer, and I'd get up there and I'd soak all that stuff, and I'd take out stuff, and I had to rebuild part of the roof because it was coming down too, riddled with termites. But I got all that done too.
I remember you and Helen in there with a steamer with the wallpaper.
Yeah, we decided we'd take some of the wallpaper off that room. It was supposed to be yours and Brian's, and we got it off, but it was a lot of work.
And the trees that you had to get out of there when the Dutch elm disease came through.
That big old tree in back, and Helen was there when they came out to cut it down. They dropped a big log, and she thought they dropped it on the house.
Shook the whole house.
Yeah, that was a mess.
That's where I started learning to drive. You remember my car, about put it in one of the...
Came over there with that little Fiat, and he started backing up and backed into the neighbor's drive that went down in there.
Yeah.
And I ran over, got on the hood of there, and told him, get out of there. Trying to get you out of there.
Yeah, it was teeter-tottering.
And we got you out of there. And then you decided you'd drive it home.
Too fast.
And you rolled it out there.
Yeah.
We battered the top back up a little bit. How did you trade that for something?
I gave it to a friend of mine. I paid $100 for it. We sat in the back of it with a bumper jack and popped the top up.
Well, then you decided you'd buck snow drifts out there in that parking lot.
Yeah, I was cutting through a parking lot and found a curb.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You're just lucky you're still alive.
Yeah. Yeah, we went through a lot of cars.
But then, as I say, they decided that we better get out of there, and we went over and started looking North Kansas City, figuring that that'd be a safe place to go.
Good schools.
Well, and the area, the schools were good and everything, and they were building that new high school over there.
Brian was still living with you then.
Yes, Brian was still with us, and he went to grade school over there, part of it, and then he went to junior high school. He decided he'd like to try to play a trumpet. And Chuck Edwards knew somebody. Chuck was a policeman, and he had a lot of connections. He came home one evening, and I told him I wanted a stainless steel sink for the kitchen. He came home one evening and put us on the front porch. He had a lot of connections. He helped us get that horn and all different things.
And Brian went clear on through high school living there.
Well, he had a bad situation on high school too, because your mother had married Dwight then, and they lived out in Johnson County. And Brian was just starting his senior year, as I remember. I may be faulted on that, but he decided he wanted to go out and live with your mother, and he just making a tale for Helen at that point. And he wanted to do things his way, and you can see from some of the pictures the way he wanted to dress and so on.
Yeah, he turned into kind of a hippie.
Yeah.
And see, I don't remember all of that. I was busy with raising Kim and.
Yeah, well, that's it. And so it didn't work out too well for him, but he never did really finish, and we tried to get him to take the GED and stuff like that. And then finally, lost his driver's license. He went in the Army for a while.
I remember that, yeah.
And when he came back, he had gotten pretty serious with some girl down in Texas, but he came back driving that little, what was it, the Chevy that had the engine in the rear.
Oh, a Corvair?
Corvair. Do you remember that?
No.
And he had some problem with it, and I knew a guy out on Trustwood Garage, and we got it out there, and he fixed it so it would run. And then he traded it for that Pontiac Tempest that had the drive shaft was a flexible steel shaft. It didn't have universal joints on it. And when he went into service, well, it was there, and I decided I would try to fix what was wrong with it. In addition to that, it had some rust on it, so we could sell it when he got home. But my dad came over to help me with that thing, and it was a real hot day, and Dad ran into a telephone pole, or sideswiped a telephone pole from Truist door. You remember that?
No, I don't remember that.
He had this old car that his father-in-law had when he passed away, and Dad had fiddled with it and straightened out dents and repainted it and everything. And he was out of work at that point. I think he just got laid off from the Pullman Company.
He was close to retirement age by
Well,
then.
he was getting close to it, but he wasn't fully retired. And he just apparently more blacked out or something, driving along Truist. Sideswiped that, and he sneaked it into the garage when he got back home over in Kansas City, Kansas.
So Cora wouldn't.
And Cora didn't know about it for a day or two.
But you and Grandpa worked on that old car and got rid of it for Brian?
Got rid of it and So when he came back home, he had that other thing and got rid of it too.
And somehow he had that pickup that I ended up with for a while. You guys had worked on that a lot.
Well, yeah, I didn't know that you got into it.
I had to borrow it for a while when I was having job problems
Oh,
back in the middle 70s
I didn't
when I
know
was trying to
that.
go to graduate school.
Well, he told me that he dropped a screw or something down the intake manifold on the thing, and that screwed up the engine. I don't know whether that was all of it or not. He had painted it. The
Yeah,
guy
it looked real good.
The next guy next door to us had a sign painting business, and he took it down there one night and he painted it. And it looked like a pretty good truck. We had the transmission worked on a little bit, pulled the transmission out, and I had a customer out in Olathe. We took it out there, and he put new seals in or something, put it back in there. That was quite an experience too.
Yeah. Well, you lived on Virginia quite a few years and helped both of us out when we were having trouble getting started.
Yeah, well, we moved in 1965, and we lived there until we moved to Albuquerque.
How'd you manage to get to Albuquerque?
Well, I was a pretty good salesman, and the guy out there, sometimes he'd be number one, sometimes I'd be number two, and back and forth.
And you were selling
Nuts and bolts for RB&W Bosco
commercial.
commercial. Trying to call on steel building manufacturers and people who are using large quantities, not the hardware stores.
Yeah.
We sold to some of the wholesale hardware that I was calling on True Value store, warehouse out at Grandview.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a big warehouse there, and trying to sell packaged stuff, but our company was not geared for that. We wanted to sell bulk.
Yeah. So you talked him into moving you to Albuquerque?
Well, my regional, or the vice president of the company, came to Kansas City, and we'd had an ice storm, and I picked him up at the airport, and he wanted to see where I lived, because I had talked to him a little bit about getting moved. We were having trouble with the lady manager of Kansas City branch, and he said he'd like to see where we lived there in North Kansas City, and went down there, and we had trees down, and all that ice storm, everything else. And he said, well, I can see why you want to move. And he says, I think we can work it out. So we had pretty much arranged to do that when my dad passed away, and you and Brian went to California with us. And
Yeah.
that '84 Oldsmobile had just bought it and had a flat tire going to the airport. You remember that?
Yeah, I don't remember that, but I remember, that was one of the last road trips we all took together. We all went out, drove out to California.
Yeah.
You kept complaining Brian and I were drinking too much.
Yeah, every time we stopped, you'd get something to drink, then you have to stop and go to the restroom.
Those big gulps are good.
But it was quite a trip. It's unfortunate it was because of that. We did go back out to the Dinosaur National Park after that. I guess I told you about that. We stopped, you remember, going out there?
It was closed or something.
They didn't have it there. They just had some stuff they brought down to get you to be interested in going up there. That's some place you want to go.
Yeah. But you talked them into transferring you out to Albuquerque.
Yeah.
And you stayed out there through what, the middle 80s until you
We came back here in 90. I retired in 62, and we stayed there for another 5 years or so. And we moved here in 1999.
What'd you like best about New Mexico?
Well, we enjoyed the climate and just the atmosphere, and they had a pretty progressive program at their college there, and you could go to stage shows and things of that kind, and they had a good music program, and of course we were able to travel all over the state and up into Colorado and take Susie along with us and our little dog.
Mhm.
We enjoyed it, the whole atmosphere, and just the beauty of that country out there.
You've always loved to travel. What's some of your most memorable trips that you've taken?
Well, I suppose if you want to go back far enough, the Griffins, and that's Grandpa and Grandma Griffin, Mom, my mother, and our cousin Bob, he's 2 years older than me, and Jack. We all went to Colorado because I had an uncle that lived out there in Denver. He had worked for Swift and Company in Colorado. Just coincidence. And we went on that trip, and Grandpa had a 1933 Chrysler that didn't have a trunk as such on it. It had a spare tire mounted on the back. So Jack made this box that was about 4 feet wide and had a door lift up on it, and you could lock it. So this we carried our groceries and stuff. We didn't carry many clothes, you know.
People didn't travel like they do now.
Deodorants and all that stuff, you know. But we made it out there, and we went up the Pikes Peak. Grandpa's car overheated. Back in those days, you know, the overheat could go up above 5,000 feet
Mm-hmm.
because the pressure was less. But we made it to the top. You know, stop. There's still highways in California. You go out 10, and they still have some of those troughs where they kept water for cars that were overheating going into California.
What kind of travel facilities did they have in those days?
Well, they had what they call tourist courts in some places. The deal going down to Arkansas when they were working on that farm down there, stayed in a little tourist court on the Tanacoma River.
And what were those like?
Branson. One room and a toilet. That's about it. But we took a lot of, enjoyed always traveling.
You told me about some of your experiences working for Swift, some of the places you had to stay.
Yes, the different ones stayed in Ellsworth, Kansas, and you're about 6 feet from the railroad tracks, and they'd go through there 2 or 3 times a night. Same way in Joplin, Missouri, there's down there, it's a railroad train went right back there. You'd have to beat the train with your orders. You'd get your orders and your collections. You had to go to the bank, get a money order for the collection you had collected, and then you'd take it to the station. And back in those days, sometimes they wouldn't stop, the train wouldn't stop. They had this bag that hung outside the station, and there was an arm, mechanical arm on the posted on the mail car, and they'd grab that and bring it into the guy that was sorting mail on the way to Kansas City.
You had to make collections and pick up the meat?
Well, no, they delivered the meat out there. Swift had all of their own delivery trucks, and we had something like 50 salesmen throughout the Kansas City, Missouri, Kansas, down into Arkansas. We had a guy that worked down in Arkansas, they called him Easy Pickens, and he said there's 2 stripes in the middle of the road, you can pass 2 cars. You got 1 stripe, pass 1 car. No stripe, don't pass. And it's just characters that worked there.
Well, you've been able to work it out most of your career where you could travel and see things. And
Yes, that's the best part of it.
yeah.
When there's another hotel out there that we stayed in, the fire escape was a rope tied to the radiator, and you're supposed to throw it out, skating, getting down that. That's something else. I had a lot of fun at it. Made pretty good money.
Been fortunate in your career that you've been able to weather some of the financial storms that have hit.
Yeah, well, never was without a job. I go from one place to the next. But I was fortunate to have the experience, swept, and started out in what they call the order writing department. And at one point they elevated me to supervising the order writing department. We had 12 girls that were typing on the old IBM Electromatics. They typed these out, and then we had a room where they had all these pneumatic tubes that distributed the labels for the product out in the warehouse, in the plant. And that was all connected together. It was interesting. They still have some of the pneumatic tubes, at the bank where you send your drive-up stuff in.
Yeah, that's handy.
Right.
To kind of wrap up, you've got a bunch of grandkids and great-grandkids. What would you want to tell them? You don't get to see them very often. I'm going to try to make DVDs of this and send it out.
Well, basically, I'd like to have them know that what kind of a person I am and how Helen is and how much we love our situation. We've tried to do the best we can with what we have, and we don't want to be dependent on anybody. As far as my future is concerned, and ours is, we feel that we're right with God, and if He wanted to take me right now, I'm ready.
Yeah.
I don't want any extreme or heroic methods to keep me alive.
Yeah.
To me, I've been in nursing homes and places where people are just hanging on by their fingernails, and their relatives have parked them there and forgotten about them, and it's not the life for me.
Yeah, you've talked about Great-Grandpa Griffin, how he ended up, so destitute. And
Right.
I've always been struck by how independent you are.
Well, I want to be. I have seen so many variations in the way people have been treated and how they've lived, and some of them so much the victim of their own circumstance to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
As long as I'm able to get up on my feet, I'm going to be independent.
What I remember about Grandpa Smith, and we haven't talked much about Great-Grandpa Smith, he was on the go right up to close to the end.
Right, yeah. The guy had very little education, probably third grade. You can see that in that handwritten thing that we have. And but he was ambitious, and he did the best he could. And he provided for himself. We went through the Depression. All they could do is pay the interest on the note. They couldn't pay any of the premium, any of the basic part of the note. That's what people had to do, and that's what I would do, or anybody else. I would advise them to do it. Don't lose your home.
Yeah.
And don't go over your head.
Don't get in over your head, because people who've gone through those hard times can tell you what it's like, and it shaped your generation.
Yeah. Well, the situation we're into now, people your age and a little younger have gotten themselves in the situation where they got the wants.
Yeah.
I want this, I want that. They're not patient. They don't want to wait until they can pay for it, get it off, and don't run up a lot of bills. You can't live on borrowed money.
Not forever. The bubble bursts.
No, it's going to catch you. And of course, the inflated prices, like out in California and Florida and some of the other places around the country, a man can be making $200,000 a year and still be in trouble because he's trying to spend $500,000 and he hasn't got it.
It's one of life's lessons that I think you've taught me, is to live within your means.
Right, that's the most important thing. If you can't be patient and wait till you can acquire, and because you're not wanting to support the banks and the lending companies and the shysters.
Yeah.
They're making a living off of people being foolish to doing the things they do.
Mm-hmm.
You don't always have to have the best car, the best house, the best refrigerator, the best clothing, whatever.
Yeah. And that's not the source of true happiness, is it?
No, it isn't. You can't feel like you're, go out and open the mail and it's going to send me another bill for something or another interest payment that I can't meet or whatever. It's
Yeah.
not the way to live.
So what would you say is real happiness based on?
Well, it's just being free and independent,
Mhm.
to being good to your children, your neighbors, and whatever.
Yeah.
You can always run into bad situations, but you don't have to live with it forever. You can change where you are.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're not ready for making the change.
No.
Sometimes, but you get awfully uncomfortable around some people. And what you're doing now in counseling people,
Yeah.
the most important thing you can do is be sincere and be what you feel that you would like to treat them like you would like to be treated.
Yeah, with respect.
Right. Yeah. Everybody, despite the problems, they still have a right to exist.
You had to do that as a salesman.
Right. But you can't live on borrowed time all the time.
Yeah.
There's no way.
And you can't be a fake the whole time. Those salesmen
No.
who were fake, you know.
Well, no, it didn't pay off. If you went out and made fun of them, or if you just tried to be a big shot and said, well, I'm out here to try to help you.
Yeah.
That's basically what you want to do. You want to sell them a good product. You want to for a good price, a satisfactory price,
Mhm.
whatever.
Yeah.
And just don't be so impatient.
Carry through on your promises.
Right. That's absolutely it.
Yeah.
If you're not comfortable, you know that you're going to make somebody else uncomfortable.
Yeah. Now, it's hard to be a fake.
All right.
All
Nobody's
those,
going to catch you.
yeah. All those years out on the road selling stuff, you couldn't be a fake.
No. It's more satisfying to me to be able to feel like you're doing a service for someone,
Yeah.
not trying to go out there and sell them something that they really don't need. There are people trying to get you to invest in this and invest in that, and they